traditional working farm, it's also organic and regenerative. Tim.
Thank you. Let me just get this bloody thing working. Hang on. Got a share screen. Right. Should be working now. Yeah, thank you very much. So you've introduced me very well. Thank you, Charlotte. Yeah, I'll just get going. So back in 2011, I did a Nuffield scholarship, and I looked at what sustainable farming was and what it meant for me. And I guess these were the key points that came out for me about what a sustainable farm, or what our sustainable farm could look like. So we're talking about maintaining flexibility, so not tying into really long, drawn out payback enterprises. So, you know, we don't want to go and set something up that's going to take 10, 15 years to pay itself off, because we didn't feel the economy was, the agricultural economy was that secure, and we need to be a bit more nimble than that. To work with more partners and less employees, to avoid buying metal that depreciates, to capture and keep natural resources. The animals are cheaper than machines, so the more that we can use an animal to do a job instead of a machine, the better. To spend money on fixing an underlying problem, as opposed to spending that same money year on year trying to fix, trying to deal with just deal with that same problem. So blackgrass, for example, you either keep spending money on blackgrass, or you look at what's causing the blackgrass and fix that. To know what we're aiming for, and to keep moving, to keep rotations going, to keep livestock moving across the farm and everything else. And probably the biggest one that I learned was this idea of working in the area of influence, and forgetting, so the circle of influence and the circle of concern. So concerns would be things like politics and what celebrities are getting up to, and influence is all the things that we can do ourselves. So we try to work as much as we can on increasing our circle of influence. The more time we spend in there, the bigger that influence can get, and the more we can deal with those bigger issues. So our farm changed from an arable farm in 2012 to one that looks a bit more like this. So now we've got mobile chickens, mobile dairy, we're growing quinoa, we're growing crops for specific markets. We dabble with pigs. I'm still looking for partners to come in with pigs. We've got sheep, doing no-till where we can. As we've just moved into organic, that's changing a bit. And we're learning an awful lot about the soil. So that picture at the top there, that's what our soil looked like before we started. And we never really see bare soil like that since we've been doing this operation. Working with partners is quite an interesting one for us. We want to ideally meet someone that is at the bottom of that sort of growth stage and invest with them there. And as they grow, we can grow with them, and we can both make money. But we realised that some of these new ideas that we're trying to embrace are more in their research and development stage or introduction stage. So we need to sort of work with them and give them the space to develop their ideas, so that then we can invest in them as they get to grow. So we sort of work with them quite a bit in that area. And of course, we realise what we've got, and we realise what the potential new partners have got. So we know we've got land, we've got business skills, which we've been doing for a while. We've got access to capital because we've been working with our banks, and we've got an established business. And we've got some general knowledge about farming, but we've got limited time. And we're very aware that the partners that want to come with us have got lots of time and energy, and they've got their specific skills, and they've got an open mind. So I've been asked today to talk to you about this idea of net zero and what steps I'm doing to become net zero. What can the industry do? And you can read the rest. And I've got a bit of a problem with that. It's a single issue problem, and I think within the regenerative agriculture world, we really got to try and avoid going down this idea of chasing a single issue like carbon, or like, you know, growing chasing yield, growing the fastest growing chicken in the world, but then it can't walk. You know, that if we got to try and embrace a whole system as opposed to just concentrate on carbon. So that's what I'm trying to avoid. One of the things that so I suppose shows it quite well was at the NFU conference this year, with Professor Miles Allen talking to us about his work on climate change and climate change modelling, and he took exactly the same scenario with dairy production and said we either owe society 10 billion or society owes us 52 billion, depending on how you do the measurements. That's a difference of 62 billion pounds. So it's a bit of a problem for me, because how are we going to measure carbon? So that's sort of a bit of a problem. And also, once we get into this idea of measuring something, we need to make a measurement that can take the complexities. Because if we get into a thing that measures, say, the carbon sequestration of ryegrass, that will be all right. But then it will struggle to deal with something complex like a herbal ley, a 17 species mix of grasses. How are we going to sort of encompass all that lot? So I see some big problems with trying to measure how carbon is going to work. So what I'm doing here is trying to work on more of a system-based process. So we call it holistic management. We're thinking about how we can interact with all these cycles. So how can we interact with the water cycle? How can we get more of that erratic rainfall to stay on our land and we can use it? The mineral cycle, how can we get those minerals cycling through our soil? So how can we get the stuff that's gone right deep down into the soil profile and bring it back up and get it cycling? How much sunlight can we get, and how can we maximize the amount of sunlight that we're using? And how much diversity and complexity can we get into the system? And the idea that the more diversity and the more complexity, the more stability we've got in our farming business. But I kind of suggest that it would be impossible for us to improve these cycles without capturing more carbon. But we might, if we were just to say, let's go down, dealing with carbon, we might forget these other cycles. And to me, the system is much more important. And that would be the same with not just carbon, with any other of these single issue sort of measurements. So what steps am I taking? That's my steps. Is it something that we can achieve? And if so, how? And I think, we can achieve it. And one way we can achieve it is to manipulate the measuring criteria. And that's quite important to me, because if we can manipulate it, then so can other interest groups manipulate it. So we need to have a really strong measure of what the carbon figure and the carbon trading figure we're going to use is, because it's at the moment it's so easy to manipulate, and it doesn't really take any consideration. None of the measurements that I've seen take any consideration into sequestration, so the amount of carbon that we're putting back into the soil. And how radical do we need to be? Well, for me, it depends what you want to sell. So we could go into like the energy companies do and start pumping carbon back into underground bunkers, or we can start growing more perennial crops and get put carbon back into the system through the liquid carbon pathway, with an estimated 50% of the carbohydrate produced in photosynthesis going back into soil, and in a perennial crop staying there. So a perennial crop like grass or miscanthus. And I don't think that's actually that radical. So I guess it's really easy to say, well, you could do lots and we could spend loads of money. We can send mirrors up into the atmosphere and do all sorts of things, or we could grow more perennial crops. And so finally, I've been pretty quick on this, sorry, but hopefully that will give us more time to talk. Some closing thoughts about what I have put together and what I think about the systematic sort of way of thinking that I'm trying to do, and I think others might be able to do as well, is firstly work out what it is that you're aiming for, and that will probably encompass something about reducing carbon, but it should be a bit more systematic, and carbon should be one element of the whole, not just reducing carbon. And get on and act now, do something now. So I love the saying that a field doesn't get ploughed by turning it over in your mind. We really ought to get on and just do something. Ask why and why not. There's so much ideas out there that they don't kind of fit the complexity of our farming system. So I think the more we challenge what's going on, the more we understand them, the more we know whether they fit our system or not. Letting in the new generation, I think, is really important, because the generation, sort of, well, I'm getting a bit older now, but and the lower generation, they've got so many ideas that are these sort of more regenerative farming ideas, and the more we can get them in and get them working faster, the faster we can get change happening. I think once we start moving away from the idea of a monocrop to a more diverse system, we start to see there's a whole range of opportunities that we can do within our land holdings. We can start stacking enterprises. So going back to the first picture I showed with the chickens and the dairy and the grass and the cereals, what we're trying to do at home is to stack as many of those things onto each other. So the dairy cattle go through first of all, and then they're followed about 4 days later by chickens. And the chickens are going through, they're pecking away at the dung. They're getting their protein from the worms that are coming into the muck, and they're also cleaning the pastures out. They obviously can't get all their food from that system, so they're also fed, and that chicken dung then adds to the fertility of the system. So we can get win-win situations as soon as we get away from this idea of sort of monocrop stuff, and we start to see how we can get more and more systems going on with each other. And ultimately, these changes that we're talking about is really big for our mind. And so I always encourage people to look after their mind, get some counselling. It doesn't have to be with a counsellor, it could be with some friends or going to the pub, but it's to keep talking. And as you're going through this change, to remember that your mind has to catch up, and you have to take your mind with you. You can't just do it physically. Hopefully that's all I've got to say, and I'm in time, so good job. And stop that. Stop share. There you go.
Thank you very much for being on time. Quite a lot of questions, so I'm going to ask them thick and fast. The first should be easy. What tool do you use to measure your carbon? Asks Christine.
Don't.
So how do you know?
I don't. All I can say is that I know that I'm improving those 4 cycles, and there's no way that I can improve those 4 cycles without improving carbon, because carbon's the cornerstone of it. So yeah. When a measure comes that actually deals with sequestration better, then I might get involved in it. But at the moment, it's sorry.
With the incentives that Minette was talking about, if it's included in an ELM scheme or whatever, would you get involved then, because you kind of have to have a measurement at that point? Yeah,
if they support what I'm already doing, then yeah, absolutely, because we're a business. But at the moment there's no incentive really to measure it and to do much about it. So yeah.
Okay, Richard Goring says, you mentioned that with the move to organic, no-till was more of a challenge. Can you tell us a bit more about the balance of benefits of organic versus no-till, and is there a way of exploring both?
Oh, absolutely. So the holy grail for me is organic no-till, and we'll achieve that using crimpers and high cover crops that we can get crimping down and everything else. We're the sort of ground that changes our metal every 4 hours when we're ploughing ground. So we don't want to be moving soil. So we've got a physical incentive not to be moving soil, as well as the biological and everything else. But it's really hard to say one is better than the other. And I used to think that ploughing was terrible, and then I started reading more into it and looking more into what people do overseas. And when we start to question how we plough, and whether we plough with lots of material, or we plough year on year on year, or we have a 4-year break between when we plough, and also how we direct drill them. If we continue to direct drill and then we have patches of poor crop that doesn't grow, is that as good as having a bit of ploughing? It's really complex. So I kind of weigh it up by observation, I guess, on my own farm.
How is your circular farming plan coming along? Asks Jamie. You have to explain what it is first as well.
Yeah, so circular farming, I guess, is what we're trying to do is to capture as much waste and not actually see it as waste, see it as a resource for another enterprise. So so an example might be, if we've got a dung heap, it's either a dung heap or it's somewhere to grow pumpkins. If you've got excess wool fleece, it's something you've got to burn because it's a pain, or you put it under your hedgerows and keep your hedgerows weed free. So that's the idea of circular farming. It's very new, and it's I guess still in its infancy, and we're still trying to learn how to take that forward. But one thing it is doing is reducing costs, so we're kind of gaining in that way.
Okay, Jan asks, you've got livestock incorporated in this system. Could you apply this approach if no stock were involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd find it harder, but because I'd have to spend more money on fuel and tractors. But there's no reason why you couldn't. I think the work in America on the sort of regen would say that it's just a slower process without livestock, because livestock, especially ruminants, are really good at inoculating soil and that sort of thing. They do come with their troubles, especially with a wet winter, when you're out wintering. It's all about balance, really.
Thank you very much. Loads of questions, most of which I want to pick up with the whole panel, which is why I'm not just putting them to you. Thank you very much. Let's move on to our next speaker, Doug Wanstall from